Washington Journal continues.
Here on Washington Journal, we'll continue our discussion on bipartisanship in Congress. We're joined by two representatives from Arizona, Congresswoman Ann Kirkpatrick, who represents the 1st District and also a Democrat, and Paul Gosar, Congressman from the 4th District of Arizona, a Republican. Welcome to both of you to Washington Journal.
Thank you so much. Good morning.
There's a headline we saw in Politico that said Ann Kirkpatrick and Paul Gosar, Congress's Arizona odd couple. The two of you are working together on issues to benefit Arizona and other issues. How did this partnership come about?
Well, you know, between the two of us, we represent most of rural Arizona. And we also come from large families that are bipartisan. Paul and I have talked about it. We have Democrats and Republicans in our families. My mother was a Republican growing up, and I always said it made for very interesting dinner conversation.
Well, I've always told the story that I'm the first of 10 kids. There's 5 Democrats, 4 Republicans, 1 independent. First time my wife ever met my family, she called her mom and said, "Oh my God, these people hate each other." So we can argue, but I think the whole aspect is that once you're elected, you represent everybody across the board. And good legislation is good legislation. And when you're working on behalf of getting people back to work and something that's crucial and critical to Arizona, like copper. Copper is one of our 5 C's that we were founded upon. You know, citrus, climate, cattle, cotton, and copper. That's a very, very important thing to the people back home. But
the issue of getting elected, the two of you faced each other in an election a couple of years ago, right? So you were, at that point, clearly on opposite teams, still are, but how do you overcome the tone of a campaign, and how did that all shake out?
You know, we were opponents. We put that behind us for the good of the people in Arizona, and we've been working together to get things done for people in Arizona. And I will say, I mean, going back to the rural areas, that people understand that they may disagree on issues, but you've got to get along.
Absolutely. You know, I think that's what politics is all about, and I think that's what our framers looked at, is they wanted people from different voices, from different walks of life, but they wanted you to truly be, and particularly in the House, representatives of the House, the people's House.
We're talking with Paul Gosar and Ann Kirkpatrick, representatives from Arizona, talking about more broadly than just Arizona issues, but we do want to open up our phone lines to everyone, of course. For Democrats, the number 202-585-3880. For Republicans, 202-585-3881. Independents, that's 202-585-3882. And for Arizona residents, we've set aside that line, 202-585-3883. Congressman Gosar, you talked about copper being, so was tell us specifically how you came together on this issue. Why is this an important issue in Arizona?
This isn't a new issue for Arizona. This has been put forward by numerous Congresses, trying to get this land deal in which it would open the 3rd largest copper reserve in the world, bringing almost $1 billion to the state of Arizona over and over again. So what we were trying to do is that you have to work with different entities. And this is a little bit more of a complex land swap because it deals with so many different entities. Roughly about 2,400 acres is what they're trading for, and in exchange the federal government gets some 5,400 acres of very pristine conservation, highly prized areas. So what we've been doing is trying to make sure that we listen to the people within the districts, the different communities, and trying to get something that can work for everybody. And then ultimately putting people back to work. I mean, these are jobs that pay $45,000 to $165,000. These are jobs that people are investing in America. They're buying cars, they're buying homes, and that's how you get an economy rolling.
And Congresswoman Kirkpatrick, how do you overcome the objections of groups like environmentalists who are more prone to obviously support Democrats? As a matter of fact, the Arizona Republic reported on one of the town halls the two of you did together on this issue, and said you had some people raising concerns and protests at that particular one. They wrote that you said the mine is a spark plug for the community. It brings money and jobs, and we can grow this diversified economy. It's an opportunity for the town to expand and be stable. Responding to environmental concerns, you said that you plan to lobby the Senate to require the federal environment review before the land exchange occurs. Did that satisfy environmental critics?
Yes, I mean, we got a very good response at our town hall for the folks who were there on these issues. And, look, people live in that community. They've lived there for generations. They're concerned because they want a good environment to raise their children, their grandchildren. And they have a lot of questions about what's the impact on the environment. Those answers can only be given to them if we do the proper studies, independent studies. So I do support that.
How important or how much of a factor are things like ratings? Let's say ratings from environmental groups, and Congressman Gosar, in your case, perhaps ratings from conservative organizations on scorecarding you, grading how you vote on specific votes.
You know, I don't pay any attention to ratings. I honestly don't. I mean, I'm listening to people in the district. It's a very diverse district. And so I listen to folks, and it's where I grew up, and try to find that common ground.
Well, I've been challenged by one of the big conservative groups when I ran for re-election, Club for Growth. One of their proponents that ran against me in the primary last year was Senator No in Arizona. And what I look at is putting things on the table. You can be a no, but what's your solution? America deserves solutions to our problems, getting people involved, mixing it up, and having the fortitude to dialogue with people. You know, I don't look at scorecards. What I look at is I weigh the evidence and make sure that the people in Arizona, in our districts, and the people of the United States, we're moving forward, and we're actually getting them behind us.
Let's hear from our viewers. We have first up in Covington, Georgia, John on our Republican line. Welcome.
How you doing this morning?
Doing fine, thank you.
I'd like to just say there's something going on up there that I don't understand. Like, they talk about having another jobs bill and all this, and that stimulus. I was looking on that stimulus thing that Marshall Joe was taking care of, and it looks like Denmark, 51.6 million, 218 million to Denmark again, 25 million to Denmark, 91, let's see, 100,000 to New Zealand, 444 million to Germany, 100 million to Spain, 3.9 million, and then 4.9 million to Great Britain. Indonesia, $200 million. Italy, 12.75 million. How's that going to fix our bridges?
Hey, John, let me ask you just quick before you let the Congress, the representatives answer. Where are you getting your figures? It sounds like you're either
off of Marshall Joe Biden's stimulus, recovery thing.
All right. Thanks for your call.
Okay, look at it though. It'd make you sick. You better have a barf bag. Thank you.
All right, John. Congressman Gosar, foreign aid.
Well, in regards to this, when we're talking about a stimulus, this is private money being invested back in a community, and this is what creates jobs. And so, you know, from this standpoint, that's looking at as trying to get people back to work, and this is reinvestment into the American dream, American ideals.
I understand the concern the gentleman's expressing, though, because I'm on the Veterans Committee, and you know, and first of all, taking care of our veterans is not a partisan issue, and we're having trouble providing the benefits for veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan and Vietnam, and you know that we really need to address that issue. We need to take care of the folks here in the United States.
What's both of your sense of how things will move forward in terms of coming to some agreement on the budget over the next week and a half or so?
It's going to be interesting. We're going to see, you know, how that plays out as a CR, the debt ceiling. Are they going to play together? Are they going to be separated? We're going to have, you know, we backed ourselves into a corner coming up with some kind of a protocol before the end of September. So it's going to be interesting to see, you know, what actually is putting on the table. And then how does the whole aspect of Obamacare, you know, it's behind schedule, it's not ready for prime time, and how does it fit in this mix?
Is it frustrating to you that the House passed some of the spending bills, but that you can't get work done on the fiscal year spending bills in time?
The biggest concern I have is sequestration. I'd like to have a CR that deals with sequestration because it's hurting defense. In my district, it's hurting, you know, our schools and our national parks, and we really need to address that. And it will continue. Those are cuts that they're MEDAX cuts that will continue year after year after year unless we address that.
Let's go. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I would actually say that we got to get back to regular order. We got to go through. That's what the budget processes are. You know, Ann's and I are from rural America. You know, people do budgets, and they have to stay on track. And Congress has to stay on track. So I'm one of these believers that we pass some type of a short-term CR and go through our budgetary process, remand, get back to regular order. And I think that's what a lot of people would like us to see, is articulate that. There's a lot to bite off to as long as I've gotten an open dialogue and had a chance to look at the numbers and say my piece.
Here we go to Bay City, Texas. William, hello there.
Hi, how are you doing this morning?
Doing fine. Go ahead with your comment.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on the whole bipartisanship. I thought that the democracy was supposed to be built on multi-partisanship instead of bipartisanship. I feel like the whole two-party system is kind of just like bleeding it dry, and there are too many cattle and not enough bulls. Everyone wants to kind of fly under the same flag. And I don't know if that's necessarily like semantically correct to say multi-partisan in the nation, but and I also wanted to comment on like the debt-based system and y'all's comments on that.
William, thanks for your call. Multi-partisanship. Other voices on Capitol Hill.
Well, I think this is, we're looking at this jobs build out bipartisan. We've built coalitions from climbers to environmentalists to the industry to consumer groups. I think that's what it's all about. We should be inclusive, not exclusive.
You said you're both from rural districts. You're from the 4th Congressional District. What's that like?
Open terrain. I mean, it's
and it's where exactly in Arizona?
Well, it's if you think about Arizona, it's the whole western side, following up California, all the way to the Mexico border, all the way up to Nevada and Utah, and then we have kind of like a big arm that comes around. We're actually asking Ann to take the southwest corner, so my district can lay siege to the city of Phoenix.
And Congresswoman Kirkpatrick.
And I represent the eastern portion, the rural portion of Arizona, along the New Mexico border, again from Utah, almost all the way down to the Mexican border.
Here we go to Christina, who's in Attleboro, Massachusetts, for Congresswoman Kirkpatrick and Congressman Gosar. Good morning, Christina, Independent Line.
Yeah, I'm an independent, and I come being from Massachusetts, Democratic state. But my question and a couple of comments. One, you talk about getting CRs, continuing resolutions. They haven't worked, so why keep doing the same thing over and over? We have to pass budgets and, keep going. But my question to both of you is, with the bipartisanship, I watch Congress do stuff and the Senate fight, the back and forth. You don't work together, and you keep Americans fighting with each other. What do you think is going to happen if do you picture us becoming two separate countries? And because that's what I'm waiting to see happen. What do you think about that if Congress and the Senate don't stop fighting they're actually fighting with the American people? And I'll go off to listen to that answer.
Christina, thanks for the call.
Well, Christina, let me say that I really see people trying to work together, like Congressman Gosar and I are. We realize that we're all Americans, and one of the big concerns right now is whether or not we're going to shut down government. I'm opposed to that. I think that's an irresponsible way to deal with the budget. And so maybe the continuing resolution is the next best step, but it's not the best step. I mean, really, as my colleague said, we need to sit down and negotiate a budget like we do with our families. We sit around the table and we set our priorities. What are our values? What are our principles? How do we want to spend our money? That's how you do a budget, and we need to do that as a country.
Congressman Gosar.
Well, I think Christina brings up a good point. Congress mirrors exactly what America looks like. We are representatives of that aspect, and I think we come from different frameworks. I certainly hope that we don't raise the tensions to the point that we stop talking. I mean, yeah, the ire is brought in from outside groups, and then us, and then the American public. What we all have to do is understand that communication is the first aspect. Start talking and start addressing these things. I've always said that the facts set you free. Trust is a series of promises kept. Start simple. Start building trust by honoring promises that you made with the American people, and do it conscientiously. That's what leadership's all about, and that's what I think is lacking up here in Washington, D.C.
We do want to remind our C-SPAN viewers and our C-SPAN radio listeners, we've set aside a line for Arizona residents. That number is 202-585-3883. And again, our Democrats line, 202-585-3880. Republicans, 202-585-3881. And for independents, that's 202-585-3882. A couple of editorials have been very praiseworthy of the effort the two of you have had. This one was from late August in the Casa Grande Dispatch. They write that you both have a history of battling each other, but now you've been working together. That has raised a few eyebrows, but it is basically what constituents expect. They said that Gosar was right when he said, quote, I was elected to represent Democrats, Republicans, and independents. They want to go beyond the bickering of partisanship. If more members of Congress acted that way, said the editorial, the body's favorability rating would be higher than its current abysmal state. the editorial praise is one thing. How do your efforts sit with your leadership on the Republican side first?
Well, I've always told everybody that I'm a dentist impersonating a politician, and I think that catches people by off guard. I'm one of 2 dentists in Congress. You know, we were sent to get work done. You know, government is about working for the people, by the people, and not dictating to them. And I think that it's ruffled some feathers. I mean, some of the consultants have made some terse comments. I mean, they actually called Ann the enemy. Last thing I know is Ann is another person of this country, a citizen, who's got an opinion, and not an enemy, but somebody who's got maybe a different opinion on some things. And obviously in this regard, we have the same, or pretty close to the same opinion. But we've been able to bridge that, making sure that what we're doing is we're moving forward in the aspect that benefits people. So I'm not too worried. I mean, that's what I thought politics was about, is having a little thicker skin.
And how about you? Do you get much pushback from your efforts with Congressman Gosar?
Well, you know, this really is about making progress, and calling each other the enemy is not how we make progress.
No.
You know, I have been called one of the more independent Democrats in Congress because I always put my district first, and that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to represent a very rural district. We are always fighting for our fair share of resources for our veterans, for infrastructure, for transportation, and that's what I'm here to do.
Let's get back to our callers. Aurora, Colorado. Louis is on our Republican line.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for C-SPAN. I just wanted to comment on this bipartisanship. I think that's good you guys are doing this show. I watched with interest yesterday as Steny Hoyer, the representative from Maryland, was on a political show. And every chance he could, he put in a jab or took swipes at Republicans or somebody in the Senate or the House. And then after I was done watching that, I turned the channel, and here's Harry Reid doing the same thing and just taking shots at the Republicans, sentence after sentence. So there's no wonder there's no getting along, so to speak, and that's why things aren't getting done, especially in the Senate, I believe. But anyway, I'm glad you guys are doing the show, and these are 2 good people here, and if more people could be like that, we'd probably be moving in the right direction.
Are there times where your leadership's statements or efforts or appearances make it difficult for you to work on the things you're trying to get done together?
Well, let me first thank the woman from Colorado for getting up so early to watch C-SPAN.
Yeah.
So, thank you, and your point's well made. And there are times, of course, that you know, I again, you know, may not completely agree with the president or leadership because I'm putting my district first, and that's just the way it happens. I mean, there are 435 people in Congress, and I say, think about, you know, the last time your family tried to go out to dinner and you're deciding where you're going to eat. Somebody wants Mexican, somebody wants Chinese, somebody wants steak. Well, you know, and that's the kind of negotiation we do on a daily basis and reach consensus.
Yeah, I think some of these are just, it goes back to family squabbles. What we got to do is stop the name calling, you know, and get back to facts. I've always said is that you can solve a lot of things when you take the emotion out of things and start bringing facts. The facts set you free. And I think that's what families do, and I think that's what Congress has to do.
To our independent line, William in St. Paul, Minnesota. Hello there.
Hi, how are you?
Doing fine.
And I also would like to thank C-SPAN. To the representative from Arizona, I just want to offer a comment on bipartisanship. I think that first call is just an example. Actually, both were questions about foreign aid. And both of you guys answered the question, I guess, in your own way. Neither one of you addressed the actual question. I think the nice lady there asked the question. I think she went off on some tangent about, I don't know, something. It had nothing to do with foreign aid. And I think that's the problem in Congress. I think we're actually looking at 2 sides of the same coin, both Republican and Democrat. And I don't think true bipartisanship I guess in a sense it exists, but in reality, I think it's basically until we get a third party, it'll never be true bipartisanship. I mean, look at the state of Arizona. You guys have a mess down there with your governor and immigration reform, and you guys can't even seem to get that right. I would like to know what both of you stand on that. Thank you.
So let's follow up on his last comment on immigration, since we haven't touched on that. Where are you on immigration?
Well, I think we need immigration reform, but I'm one of those people that having one limited committee viewpoint and a limited amendment process on a Senate floor is actually a good bill. I want the American public to have the dialogue, an open dialogue, and in smaller piecemeal aspects. You shouldn't have to pass something to find out what's in a bill. Have the open dialogue with the American people, share the aspects with them, and allow them to integrate their thoughts and ideas. Immigration is so important to the threat of this country that it needs to take its time, not rush through. Take your time. Talk about border security, talk about visa reform, talk about guest worker programs. All these are so important, but keep them simple, very germane. We've asked for this over and over again as smaller bills that are well laid out with the American public. You know, a lot of people compliment, and talk about Arizona having a problem with immigration. No, we're in Arizona. You got to know its history. It's always asking questions. You may not like the answer they came up with, but they had the fortitude to come forward with a question. There is a problem with immigration. We need to address it. And Arizona is always answering the call, asking the question, what do we do with this? So I'm not ashamed of what Arizona. I'm very, very glad about Arizona asking the question, because today we're talking about immigration reform. If it wasn't for Arizona, we wouldn't be talking about immigration reform.
Was the issue of immigration top of the list in terms of your August recess when you did town halls or meetings with constituents? Did you find that issue at the top of their list?
Well, it's one of the reasons I initially ran for Congress, because I was in the state legislature in Arizona and very frustrated with the fact that Congress wasn't dealing with it. And I appreciate and applaud our Senators McCain and Flake for their leadership in the Senate in crafting a bipartisan effort. We've got that going on in the House. It is a bipartisan issue. That's how we're going to get it done. One of the things I did is set up, Bill, an immigration advisory group. It's very broad spectrum. It's ranchers, farmers, chambers, business people, dreamers, faith groups, all to sit around the table again and say, what makes sense? And I think that Arizonans, I know Arizonans are common sense folks, pragmatic folks. They want to get something done. And again, the way we do that is to sit around the table and let's talk about this and find that common ground.
And the issue of immigration is front page of the Arizona Republic this morning. License ban expanded is their headline. They say that state extends the driver's license ban to all migrants granted deferred action, one of only 2 states that deny driver's licenses to young, undocumented immigrants allowed to stay and work, is expanding the ban to include any immigrant granted deferred action from deportation. In terms of the drafting legislation for the House or for Congress, how closely do you talk to the state's governor, Jan Brewer?
I talked to her quite a bit. I mean, we've had tragedies in Arizona that have brought us together. The Yarnell fire that happened in July, where we lost 19 firefighters in a tragic fire incident. That's one of the things that I think has been important is how does the federal interaction with the state and local municipalities? That's one of the things rural America, and particularly rural Arizona, is very, very good. When I go back on recess, I'm meeting with mayors and city council and chambers. And also I think it's very, very important that your chief executive officer for the state, the governor, that you ought to be in step where she's going or where are they going in regards to legislation, directions of the state. And when I talk to her and I talk to my constituents, jobs are number one. It's not immigration, it's about jobs. People want to be back rebuilding this country, being involved in it, having a say. So immigration wasn't number one. It wasn't even number 2 on our town hall list, but jobs and jobs were 1 and 2.
Let's hear from Arizona. Many Farms, Arizona. Charlotte's a Democrat there. Welcome to Washington Journal.
Good morning.
Good morning. You're on the air. Go ahead.
Good morning. I've been watching C-SPAN for a year or 2, and I am very happy and fortunate to be on listening to Ann Kirkpatrick and Mr. Gosar. Thank you to be on C-SPAN. I'm a Native American from Many Farms, Arizona, and I'm very proud of you to be working together. And then the other one is that basically the northern Arizona on the Navajo Reservation, the infrastructure is it does need development, and I'm very happy to hear that you as partners are working together. But the part that I also know is the immigration policy. I did see our representative, our Senator Flake, and also McCain working together, because we are one country, we are one state, and that the way I feel is that we are diverse. At the same time, I feel that I depend on our leaders to work together to make it the best for Arizona. So, but the part that I want to really explain is the infrastructure. Our unemployment is very high, that I feel that we have the ability as leaders to help us to go forward.
All right, Charlotte, thank you for your call.
Yat ea bene, Anchor Patrick Yinsha, thank you for calling in this morning, getting up so early. You're absolutely right. Infrastructure is a huge issue for us. Bill, my district has 12 tribes. 25% of the district is Native American. I grew up on tribal land, and many parts do not have running water, electricity. The school buses, Charlotte, as you know, run on dirt roads, and we've had a lot of rain lately. We've got communities that are flooded out with no cell phone coverage, no communications, let alone being able to get supplies to those communities. So it's a huge concern.
And you were speaking there at the end, Navajo?
Yes.
So how large in your district? You said 25% is Native American. How much territory is that in your district?
That's a good question. I actually don't know exactly how much. Do you know?
Probably about half of her district.
Probably about half.
I'm probably not as much as this is hers, but she's probably got, by land mass and Native Americans, probably about half of her district is Native Americans.
She also mentioned the unemployment issue among Native Americans. Any idea how that compares to the, 7.3 national average?
On Native tribes, it's much higher. For example, the San Carlos has an unemployment rate over 70%. Navajo Nation is close to almost 50%, yes.
Well, so she talked about infrastructure. If there were one thing that the two of you could see passed in Congress in terms of affecting Native areas, what would that be? Or one thing that Congress could do, I guess.
Well, and when Paul said, it's about jobs and getting people back to work, that's exactly right. And that is the one issue that unifies rural Arizona, and regardless whether you're in my district or his district, and you start with infrastructure. One of the things people don't realize is we don't have broadband and cell phone coverage in many areas. And when you talk with businesses about locating to rural Arizona, and they say, we talk to our corporate office by broadband, by the internet, and you don't have that. We are starting with very, very basic infrastructure.
And you also have huge road infrastructures throughout. I mean, Arizona's huge. I mean, the original District 1 was bigger than the size of Pennsylvania. So when you're on the road, you're on the road. And a lot of our roads, we have lots of public lands, and so in some cases they're wonderful to have these great open spaces, but there's costs with them. We get shuffled the end of the road from the federal government of maintenance on this from local municipalities. Our education aspects, you've got to be able to drive from one place to another, and that happens, and it's interrupted when you have big snowstorms or big rains. So it's very problematic. But the fortitude of the rural Arizonan is pretty incredible.
Here is Colorado Springs. John's a Republican caller. Good morning, John. Go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here on C-SPAN. I was wondering about the lobbyists. You hear Obama talking about stopping that process, and I want to know how much you think that the personal agendas or the lobbyist situation, which is worse against the bipartisanship. Thank you.
Well, I'm a believer that everybody should have a voice and hear everybody's voice on issues. It's up to us as members of and representatives to balance that, to make sure that we're doing the right thing, getting that expertise. You know, the president has made the comment that he wants to limit that. The problem is it should speak louder. We haven't seen that. We've seen a predication that when you are a lobbyist, particularly in raising money, that you have better access to the administration. I don't think that's right. I think that it gets back to what's good for our constituents, the people back home, and how does it work in the fabric of getting this country back to work and functioning on all cylinders.
Back to Arizona, this time to Phoenix, and Steve, who is an independent there. Hi, Steve.
Hey, good morning, and thank you for C-SPAN. I noticed that the topic was bipartisanship, but I'd like to show how it often works. They're talking about illegal immigration, and one of the parties would say, well, we can't send them all back. That would ruin the economy. And the other party would say, we can't send them all back. That would tear apart families. So I'd like to go with the second one first. They knew that they were breaking law in the first place, so that was the chance that they were taking about, separating their family. And about the first part, you most certainly can replace 11 million people overnight, because in trucking, we have a 100% turnover rate every year. That means that for every guy you got working at your trucking company, by the end of the year, there's going to be another guy working it. And if you think I'm kidding, call the OOIDA and ask them for their statistics. And that's my point. The people who were legal, the citizens and the legal aliens, they did what was right. But now the laws are getting passed to supersede them and make the lawbreakers benefit. And I'd like the Congress people there to explain to me how it is that we, who are legal and should be represented, are being overlooked for people who aren't legal. That would be the illegal worker and their illegal hirer, because that's against the law, hiring people that aren't supposed to be working here.
All right, Steve, Representative Kirkpatrick.
There has to be a pathway that allows people to earn the right to be citizens, and our farmers are very common sense and pragmatic, and they've come up with a solution, at least in terms of agricultural workers, and they've submitted a bill to Congress that says that, if you can show that you're employed in the agricultural industry, then, you have legal status for a limited time, and you can choose whether you want to become a citizen or you want a visa to work in the country. And, we're listening to those kind of very pragmatic, common sense ideas. It has to be earned. Your right to citizenship has to be earned. You're right about that.
The Arizona Republic had a picture from your recent town hall, the town hall you did, one of the town halls, I guess, that you did during August together. This is largely focused on the issue of the copper mine. What brought you together for this particular issue, and tell us about how well it was received for the audience there?
I think it was a packed house. Superior's a little town of less than 1,000 people, and I think there were well over 400 people that showed up for. That's how much it means. Unemployment is very, very high in the mining area, in this area, and so this is a big deal.
Superior in your district or your district?
It's in my district, and it's in the copper corridor, and that's an area in Arizona that's been copper mining forever. I mean, that's basically the industry there. So, when you talk with folks, they're going back third, fourth generation copper miners, and that's what they do. That's what they care about, and we had overwhelming response. The purpose of doing the town hall was I ran legislation when I was in my first term. Paul ran legislation. We've worked together, and we wanted people to know exactly what is in the current legislation. And one thing that's very important, the Native Americans in that area have sacred sites. Mm-hmm. They have a sacred site called Apache Leap. We took that out of the land exchange. And so when we put that slide up in the auditorium, and you could almost hear a pin drop in the room, because people are like, oh, that's been a contentious issue. These two representatives work together. That's out of the land exchange. That's no longer on the table.
Where is this bill in the process?
Well, it's come out of, I've stewarded it out of the subcommittee on natural resources and out of the Natural Resources Committee, and it's sitting poised possibly this Friday, as long as a CR or something doesn't come forward or something doesn't happen in Syria. So we may be seeing this coming out of the House this Friday. And then we've actually co-sponsored this. Senator Flake and Senator McCain have also done this in the Senate side. It's about time to get this over the hurdles. But going back to, I think, looking at how we do this, I think that you know, Ann's got assets that she's good at, and so do I. And I think when people got a chance to see, you know, okay, ask this question, maybe it's better for me to answer, or maybe it was better for Ann to answer, they actually really appreciated to get that sense that we were very in tune with the legislation, could answer their questions factually based. And boy, it set a lot of people aside. They were sitting back going, wow.
Bottom line, this bill passes Congress. What are your realistic expectations on how many jobs it generates?
Over 4,000. These are high-paying jobs between $45,000 and $165,000. This is real money. I mean, this is not investment money from the federal government. This is private enterprise producing something. Resources like copper. Each of those windmills that you see, those big windmills, has 5 tons of copper. We have a big solar plant down in Gila Bend. There is 90 miles of copper in there. Copper's huge in the new technology aspect. Copper's king. And we're importing now 30% of it. This could actually take a big chunk of that, produce jobs, and when you have mining or resources money, it circulates within your state 5 to 8 times before it leaves the state. Take $1 billion and add it into your economy. It's a big deal, and when it's rural Arizona, it's even a bigger deal.
Let's go to California, San Bernardino. Tyrus is on our Democrats line.
Yes, how you doing?
Doing fine, thank you.
Great. I just had a little analogy on this. This is just my take on it. We had an administration that set the country ablaze, right? Well, now the people, we voted for a new fire chief. Now, though, the administration, they don't want to let us use the hoses now. You know what I'm saying? That's just not bipartisan to me. I mean, bipartisan would be just go ahead and help us fix the country. I mean, I watch a lot of this right here, and I mean, for bipartisan, I mean, all Republicans have to do is come together and help us fix this country. Because when their administration was in there, it went bad. Now we got a new fire chief. The people overwhelmingly voted for a new fire chief. Let it give us some hoses to fix the country. Plain and simple. You know what I'm saying? As far as on immigration right here, my feeling is that here it is. You wanted cheap labor. Now you got a whole lot of cheap labor out here. People out here for cheap labor. Now they don't want them. Now they don't want them here, but they want their votes. You know, it's really sad to me on how people sit and ignore the fact of the truth. I mean, my mom told me that one thing, right is right and wrong is wrong. Wrong don't right nobody. Wrong is wrong and right is right, and right won't wrong no one.
All right, Tyrus from San Bernardino. Any thoughts? Yeah.
Thank you for calling in and expressing your opinion. I'd like to go back to Paul's comment about jobs and this project that we're working on, because, as I said, you know, my work, my vision for Arizona is a diversified, stable economy. And what this bill does is it's a spark plug. It's not the end-all, be-all in terms of jobs for Arizona, but as Paul said, over 4,000 jobs. That's a huge jump start getting people back to work. But it doesn't stop there. I mean, we have to continue to bring in other industries, address the infrastructure needs, so that we've got a diversified, stable economy. The price of copper comes and goes. Mining comes and goes, yep. But at the end of the day, we still need to have people working.
Let me ask both of you, on another issue, in reaction to the Navy Yard shooting on Monday and the 12 people shot there. What have you heard from constituents and any calls for Congress to take up gun legislation?
My district is very pro-Second Amendment. Here you have some of the strictest gun laws in the United States, and you still have a shooter. That's not what the Second Amendment was all about. It was restriction. What we want to do is proper ownership and making sure there's a stewardship. But the Second Amendment is a very strong amendment. It actually allows you to have all the rest of your amendments, from your right to speech to quartering, not quartering the military, to looking at all the freedoms that we have. So what they want to see is they want to make sure that there's a common sense application. Uphold the rule of law instead of adding more and more rules and regulations that restricts that ability.
Congresswoman Kirkpatrick, what are you hearing, and what would you?
Well, let me first say, I mean, my heart goes out to the families and to the victims of the shooting. I was getting ready for work when that came over the television, and these are folks who went to work that day, and I just can't get it out of my mind that they went to work doing their job, and they didn't return at the end of the day. And so, you know, I have heavy grief in my heart for those families, and I just want to let them know that they have my sympathy. In terms of what do we do about guns, after Newtown started talking with folks in my district, I have a lot of NRA members in my district. That's, you know, part of our rural life. I'm a gun owner. I grew up hunting with my dad. But there's a consensus around we should strengthen background checks, crack down on illegal gun sales. But the real issue is mental health treatment. I mean, we're now finding out that once again we had a shooter who had mental health issues that weren't being addressed. That's really where the efforts need to be.
Let's go back to Arizona. Glendale's next. Nick, who is an independent there. Welcome to Washington Journal.
Good morning. Just a quick point on the gun issue. You know, I'm originally from Chicago, one of the most restrictive gun places in America. And I don't need to tell anybody what the crime rate was like. Having grown up in the inner city, even though the gun laws were very tight, I never knew anybody who didn't have one. So gun laws are kind of silly. I live in Arizona now. I feel much safer. And I think that the statistics bear out. Having said that, back on the point of jobs and cooperation, I always find it funny that certain things the Congress can just agree on anything. I mean, for example, foreign aid, we're poor here. There's people, I'm on disability. I broke my back 4 years ago. And the funniest thing is, my senators and my congressmen can easily take my money away from me, send it to Israel, send it to Egypt, send it to all over the world, but somehow, somewhere forget that I'm here. Also, just a really quick point. I wish you guys would agree on Syria. 3 things. Number 1, Christians don't need to die at the hands of Al-Qaeda, while our senators and congressmen are actually sending money to Al-Qaeda. Is the irony lost on anybody that Manning's in jail for informing Al-Qaeda? But my senator, my congressman send money to Al-Qaeda every day, and they call them the Free Syrian Army. And if they change the name, somehow, somewhere, they're no longer Al-Qaeda, even though everybody knows they're Al-Qaeda. Now, people have said to me, well, they're only a small percentage, 10, 15, I think Kerry said, 10, 15%, 20%, I don't know. But here's the point. The point is Manning wasn't accused of giving Al-Qaeda information directly. He was accused of giving information that Al-Qaeda could get. And I just want to know, why isn't any of my congressmen or senators being arrested for sending money, weapons, and aid to Al-Qaeda? Because that's what they're doing. I have family back in Syria, in that small town that right now is trying to be freed from those Al-Qaeda terrorists.
Nick in Glendale, Arizona, will get a response from you. Thank you for your call.
Well, I agree with Nick. I actually introduced legislation that we don't support enemies of the state from this country that hate us. It's called the FALT Act. That if you don't agree with a peaceful aspect of upholding civil liberties and human rights, that you don't do like America looks at in good behavior, that you get no money. And you shouldn't get any money in that regards. But he also brings up an aspect of our failing economy here in this country, and that is what we have to do is we've got a government that's out of control. It is way too big. What we have to do is empower people to be part of that solution and get government out of the way. One of the things that I do all the time is I go all over our state talking to business owners, to cities, municipalities, to consumer groups. And one of the things they actually say is that Arizona is ready to take off. We could see growth rates of 4 to 5 times what they are today. The biggest problem is the federal government dictating to us. Instead of fostering an area where people have an opportunity to succeed, not an equal opportunity as an outcome, but opportunity to succeed. And I think that's our biggest problem is we're bogged down into a big government. And that's where I have also said is that half of America believes in the nanny state, the big government. 50% believe in that personal accountability, personal responsibility built this great country. We've got to have an idea where we're going. America's got to decide.
And I could also hear in his question a concern about, where's the balance between national security and privacy? How do we balance those two things? How much of our privacy are we willing to give up in terms of security? And that's a conversation we need to have as a nation. and really talk about that.
Yep.
You know, where are we comfortable in terms of how much privacy we want, how much security we want, and that's something we have to talk about.
On the issue of privacy, a front page story in the New York Times: extended ruling by secret court backs collection of phone data. In a 29-page opinion that quoted the NSA director Keith Alexander saying the leaks had caused significant and irreversible damage to national security, Judge Claire Egan, a federal judge in the Northern District of Oklahoma, declared that the program was lawful. So she wrote, any decision about whether to keep it was a political question and not a legal one. About 5 more minutes with our representatives from Arizona. Let's go to Eric, who is in Patterson, California. Eric, hello there on a Republican line.
Yeah, good morning. Hope you guys are doing well. I just want to say that I believe right now we're in a marriage between liberals and conservatives. And for me personally, I think this marriage has to end. I used to believe in bipartisanship, but as a minority, as a so-called minority, I've been called a sellout by people from my own race. And no self-respecting Hispanic should ever vote for Republicans. And the more I hear that kind of talk, the more I dig my heels in, and I'm fed up with it, basically. And so that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, Eric.
You know, we're all people, and this is about what we're talking about today is putting people over politics in terms of good ideas. And that's what I'm looking for is solutions, good ideas, regardless of where they come from. That's what we're talking about, good ideas that are going to move our country forward. We are all people. We are all Americans.
We've talked about the copper issue in Arizona and immigration. Are there issues in Arizona or in the West that you don't hear much coverage about but have national implications that either C-SPAN or other media outlets don't cover that you think should be brought to the national attention?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I sit on natural resources and talking about the interaction of federal lands and the western states that have large swaths of federal lands. We were promised multiple use aspects of those. Our schools get less than 1/2 of the money that you get east of the Mississippi. And part of that is that we have large swaths of public land. What we have to do is it's got to be a win-win situation for the western states. We're always here up at Washington, D.C. begging for PILT and secure rural schools that we were promised that would support our schools. Mining, a lot of the royalties that we're going to exchange for resources and for timber harvesting, you see these big fires in California. A lot of that goes to our K through 12 education. So we have to have a conversation. No isn't an answer in regards to just not allowing any timber harvesting or actually involvement in public lands. People in the East Coast really don't understand what the western states have to manage. We spend a lot of our own resources maintaining those roads at our cost comparatively to everybody's involvement in how they get to utilize them.
Arizona, western issues do you agree with that or just so?
I agree, and it's great to have Paul on natural resources. Forest health is a huge issue for us. We were both at the Yarnell fire the morning after the 19 hotshots were lost, and we were seeing homes that were still smoldering. The devastation we've seen firsthand. We know that. We know how important it is to address those issues. We both support the Forest Restoration Initiative, which is not only a job creator, but also protects our communities from these horrific wildfires.
If you take it, for example, Bill, Ann brings us up. In my first 2 terms, the first term, the largest Arizona forest fire on record, the Wallow Fire. We spent hundreds of millions of dollars putting that fire out. We lost $2.5 billion of assets. 20% of the world's known spotted owl population burned up. Who won? We all lost. What we've got to do is put people back to work in this aspect, recreate that enterprise. No isn't an answer anymore. It's what that solution. And part of the problem why it's not off the ground is part of government's bureaucracy. If you think about this, think of all the benefits that come from a healthy forest. think of all the benefits that come when you're managing your resource properly, when those resources and those taxes go to education. That's the whole process of science. I love STEM. I'm part of that educational process of science and math. But it's got to be based on facts, and we got to get people that say, hey, listen, we got to move forward, and we got to get answers on the table.
One more call for both of you. This is Roberta. She's in Hingham, Massachusetts. Independent line.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
I'd just like to get back to the topic of bipartisanship in Congress, and I think that there's a problem right there in the title, and the problem is that we have a two-party system where the politicians care more about the parties and getting reelected than they do solving problems. And so the only solution I see to this problem is to have term limits, elect politicians to one longer term so that they're not constantly running for reelection and that they need their party's support to do it. And the other thing I would suggest to voters is that if they live in a state or in whatever district they're in, if they know that the election is in the bag, vote for a third-party candidate. I did not vote for Bush either time, and I did not vote for the Republicans either time, the Democrats, because I just can't stand these parties voting in lockstep with.
Okay, Roberta, thank you for your comments. Her comment on term limits, how do you feel about that?
Well, let me just say, Roberta, that you're not alone in your opinion. I hear this very frequently, and the fact that our Constitution says that members of the House of Representatives have to run every 2 years may not make sense anymore, but it's going to be a monumental effort to change that. But I hear that comment very frequently.
I'm not in favor of term limits. I'll show myself the door. If I can't solve problems and get the job done, I will show myself the door. You're not going to have to worry about that. But what I think it actually comes down to is American being involved with the aspect of governing. We have town halls, and what's sad is that in some cases when there is an issue that's controversial like immigration or Obamacare, you're going to see lots of people showing up. But then the day-to-day aspects, no one really cares until it really affects them. America's got to be involved in the aspects of politics. You got to start looking your representative in the eye. I like it running every 2 years. Is it a pain? Absolutely. But it's the people's house, and you're much more in tune of what's going on the grassroots all the way across the board. Interactive. Just because you put a third party, it's not going to make it any better. What you should be doing is looking at the caliber of the candidate, making sure that the person that you're putting there is a problem solver. That's what's frustrating about this job, is every day as a dentist for 25 years, I was a problem solver, and I actually saw results. The problem here is you don't solve anything, and it's very frustrating. You go, now what did I accomplish at the end of the day?
One of two dentists on Capitol Hill, Paul Gosar, Congressman from the 4th District of Arizona, and Ann Kirkpatrick, representing the 1st District. Thanks for being with us this morning.
Thank you, Bill.
Bill, thank you very much.